Hey class, today I'm going to talk to you about unlocking and achieving your potential and how we should look at that from a standpoint of being an entrepreneur, being a new um, employee at a company, starting a new business, a range of different situations where being entrepreneurial, having a mindset that is geared towards growth, towards optimizing the opportunities available are so critical. So to kind of start it off, I want to start off with a kind of a warm-up question for us all here. And the warm-up question conceptually sounds simple, but I'm going to have us maybe work through this problem here. So the question here is, a bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total, and the bat costs $1 more than the ball. So how much does the ball cost, right? And so just to kind of illustrate this question, we've got A plus B equals 110, okay? So what we're trying to solve for here is B, the ball. And the options for what ball might be, I'll give you two options. Is ball 10 cents? Is it 5 cents? Okay. So I want to give us a moment just to think of this question. And candidly, when this question was posed to me, I have to say that I immediately went to 10 cents. Okay. And so to think about this question, you're thinking, okay, the ball is 10 cents and the bat is $1, so it's $1.10. But let's actually see what happens if we put this into actual math, okay? If we actually solve for this. If we pick option A here, we're gonna fill in 10 cents for the ball. And remember that the bat is $1 more than the ball, right? So that means that the bat is gonna be $1.10 and the ball is gonna be 10 cents. So that puts us over the $1.10. So that can't be the case, right? So here, let's look at option B, which is 5 cents. If the ball is 5 cents and the bat is $1 more than the ball, that means that this bat is $1.05. And when you actually compute this out, that means that the total is $1.10. But I think it's so critical to understand why this question is so hard. It's hard because when we look at a question like this, we tend to think quickly, we tend to think intuitively, and intuitively you're thinking, ball is 10 cents, bat has to be $1, but we're not really taking the time to read through and digest this question critically, right? Remember that the question prompt is that the bat costs $1 more than the ball, right? So thinking that it's just a simple equation and the bat's $1 and the ball is 10 cents really doesn't solve for the right answer here. What we have to do is think about the wording and really take the time to look through and in some cases even solve for the question. So there's a lot of very educated, very qualified people who might get this wrong, but it kind of shows the importance of really critically thinking and sometimes taking the time to think about a question. So when we approach problem solving, we've got to understand that there are two systems of thinking, okay? And one's not necessarily better than the other. We just have to recognize that we employ both systems of thinking. The first system of thinking is fast and intuitive. And as part of this system of thinking, it's easy for us, right? It operates quickly. We don't really need to, take a lot of time or a lot of brain energy either. We can just kind of effortlessly, automatically come to decisions and conclusions about things. But this type of thinking is prone to biases. It's prone to errors, particularly when situations are complex or ambiguous. We tend to miss over or skip details. This is where our brain has this tendency to kind of stereotype, right? To generalize based on our experience. And, again, that's not always going to lead to the best outcomes or the best results. So system 2, on the other hand, is more slow and deliberate. System 2 involves conscious, logical calculating, right? Taking the time to really parse through a problem or a question. And with system 2, we really allocate effort to mental activities. And here it takes a degree of concentration. It takes, the hard work of really critically thinking through a problem. Now, this isn't, ideal in every situation or scenario. Some of you may have been watching, the World Series recently. And if you look at a situation where a pitch is coming and there really isn't a whole lot of time to act, or, the baseball's in play, you might not have time for slow and deliberate thinking. You might have to respond more intuitively, have an intuition about what the right play is or what the right thing to do is. But system 2, in a lot of situations, leads us to a greater degree of accuracy, leads us to more logical thinking that allows us to really be more strategic and more long-term oriented. So it's important to understand that we have in our brains both systems at play. Some of us may tend to use system 1 a little bit more frequently, and we just have to be cognizant of that, and we have to recognize that, particularly when it could lead to errors like the ones that we've just illustrated here. So one of the things that is so kind of critical about understanding real world application and succeeding in the real world is to understand that ultimately this idea of your potential, we all have this idea that we're going to realize our potential, that it's something that exists out there in the abstract. That's not the case at all. Your potential is here today, right? Your potential is the skills, the opportunities, the ability to influence things in the real world that you have today, right? And so understanding the importance of and the agency you have in the present is so critical to be able to really unlock that potential, so to speak, right? If you see it as an abstract thing somewhere in the future, you're going to really miss out on the opportunities you have available today. So how do we make the most of what we have today? First, when we think about potential, I just want to kind of give you the myth versus the reality and the truth, okay? So the myth is potential is some sort of hidden, reserved, it's untapped talent waiting to be discovered through motivation or willpower. That's the myth. That's what a lot of us, can believe at times. The reality of it is that potential is a direct reflection of how often you successfully avoid predictable and preventable mistakes, right? A lot of us think that potential is hitting the home run, right? Achieving winning the lottery ticket, so to speak, hitting it big. But the reality of it is that potential comes down to execution, and sometimes it's execution of the small things, right? Executing those things well and consistently over a period of time is really, in essence, unlocking the potential, right? So the truth is that talent is wasted faster than it's ever discovered. And most people never reach their ceiling because they sabotage themselves before they even get close. So it's important to understand this fallacy of what potential is and what it isn't, okay? So let me give you a formula for potential. So potential is skill times consistency minus the error rate, okay? So again, that's skill, the level of skill you have, times consistency minus the error rate. So what does this tell us? We might see people who we admire as, incredibly skilled, a lot of, natural ability. But again, remember, if they're not consistent about the way that they execute on that, right? That doesn't lead to a lot of output here, right? And more than that, if they have tendencies to commit a lot of errors, if they don't have systems in place, if they don't have habits in place that allow them to minimize or mitigate the number of errors, that ultimately it won't really lead to a great output, right? So when you think of potential, again, some of us, we work with the skills that we have, but again, what we can focus on, in addition to kind of building skills, but really thinking about consistency and minimizing error rate, okay? So here are some, I guess, cognitive traps that might cause us to waste our potential. I'll give you one, okay? Jumping to conclusions based on what feels right rather than what the data actually shows, okay? Again, it's kind of biasing type 1 thinking versus type 2, right? And you see patterns, you begin to see patterns where none really exist. You make snap judgments based on stereotypes, and sometimes we're all guilty of this. We confuse correlation with causation. So what's an example of this? Assuming a well-dressed person in a business context must be confident, or that past success guarantees future performance. Again, that might be relevant information, but it's something to consider in the totality of circumstances, not something that we should make a snap judgment on, okay? So fallacy 2, something called the gambler's fallacy. What is this? It's believing that the universe owes you a win after a series of losses, right? I've had a string of bad luck. I'm due for something positive to happen. So thinking that past independent events somehow influence future probabilities is also a fallacy, because this idea that you've paid your dues and success is inevitable is a fallacy, right? Just because you've had a string of losses doesn't mean that you should double down on those losses. Sometimes it means maybe you should cut your losses, right? And so the last fallacy, or the last kind of cognitive trap, is this idea of the Peter principle. And what is this? It's promoting yourself beyond your current skill set and then failing to acknowledge new demands. So, some people might say that this is rising to your level of incompetence and staying there. What's an example of this? Let's say you have a brilliant engineer who becomes a mediocre manager, or a star salesperson who then struggles as a team leader, all because the skills that get you promoted to a particular place aren't the skills that that new role requires. So it's important to understand that what might have led you to your current position in terms of succeeding to get there aren't necessarily the same skills or the aptitude that allows you to succeed in that position or role that you hold, right? So understanding what the demands of your role or your situation might be are so important, right? Rather than just sort of overestimating that, the fact that you're there means that, you have everything that's necessary to succeed, okay? So again, I want to sort of highlight this principle more than anything. It's not always about higher IQ, more talent, right? If I just had more luck, more, whatever it is, it's about things that you can control. It's about creating better systems, right? Creating more discipline within yourself so that you can actually execute on the opportunities that you have. All of us have different opportunities that are given to us, right? Your opportunities are going to be different than mine. Mine are going to be different than someone else's. What's key here is understanding that we can't always control these external factors, but we can control how we respond and how we execute on those opportunities and in those situations. Now, in order to do this, understand that this has to do with systems. It has to do with discipline, right? It has to do with how we set ourselves up to execute and succeed. And so remember that checklists will always beat memory, okay? And feedback loops are going to reveal blind spots in your thinking. So when you can't see something, you won't be able to fix it, right? And so you need that regular feedback, whether that's consulting with a mentor, whether that's looking at data, whether that's reflecting on situations, opportunities, and outcomes, right? That becomes so critical to succeeding over the long term. And remember, a lot of us think about this, New Year's resolutions, right? We have our resolutions, whether that's for, gym memberships, or whether that's for, new hobbies or things that we're going to take up. But again, potential isn't about this sort of initial motivation. It's really about maintenance. It's about consistency over the long term, right? I can be incredibly motivated to run a marathon on one day and train incredibly hard on one day, but that's not going to allow me to really run a marathon in 6 months from now, right? I mean, regardless of how much training I do in any given day, that won't be enough, and I might even overtrain in that day. So again, it's this idea of maintenance and consistency over a period of time, okay? So just to kind of bring it to a close, maybe some practical tips about self-reflection. And you can probably, just do this in a quick 15-minute exercise, but take some time to maybe identify recurring mistakes. Write down 2 to 3 mistakes that you keep making. Be specific, right? Again, don't be general, right? Because if it's too general, if it's too vague, it really won't have a lot of utility. So you want to be very specific. For example, instead of saying, I need to get better organized, right? What does that tell you? It's too general. Have something more specific. I miss deadlines because I don't break projects into smaller milestones, right? Again, be very specific when you do this self-reflection. Also, label the root cause, right? For each mistake, identify the bias, the cognitive trap, or the process gap behind it, right? Is it the planning fallacy? Is it overconfidence? Do you lack a checklist, right? Be able to identify what the root cause, do a root cause analysis on those mistakes. And then the last segment is, looking forward, design a system that is preventative of repeating those same mistakes over and over again, right? So create one small system or a habit to prevent that recurrence, right? And again, be very specific about these. It doesn't have to be this sort of broad, overarching, very grandiose goal, but make it a concrete intervention, right? Maybe it's a weekly calendar review. Maybe it's a pre-decision checklist, or maybe it's a waiting period before you jump or act on a decision. So again, small moves so that we can make the changes and better execute on the small things, because those small things accumulate to something much larger. And again, the final truth is, remember that you don't have to add more potential. You don't need to unlock some hidden reserve or discover your true calling. You don't need a miracle or a breakthrough. You just have to have less leakage. And by leakage, I mean these small mistakes that really prevent you from being able to execute on the opportunities that you're given, the opportunities that are available to you. So thank you so much for listening to this, and I look forward to your reflection and to see what you all are able to take away from this. All right, thank you.